Give everyone a second here. Alrighty. Welcome, everyone. You are joining us for Design Considerations for Automated Manufacturing of Optical Assemblies. This webinar is presented by Benchmark and hosted by us at Photonics Media. Today, you're going to hear from Zach Clausen, a staff optical engineer at Benchmark. He earned a master's degree in applied physics and is here today to share some tips on optimizing optical assembly designs for automated manufacturing, focusing on better alignment, greater efficiency, and improved production. You can ask questions or leave comments in the chat box at any time. If you have any technical issues throughout the event, please log out and back into the session to rejoin. You will be able to access the recording of this webinar online after the webinar, and you will get links to that recording in your email inbox. So with nothing further from me, I would like to welcome Zach. Thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Jacob. Thank you for that nice introduction. I will get things shared here. All right, let me know when you can see it. Good?
Yeah, it looks great.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Jacob. All right, like Jacob said, my name is Zach Clausen. I'm a staff optical engineer with Benchmark Electronics. I'm going to talk about some different design considerations for automated manufacturing of optical assemblies today. Just a quick overview here. We'll talk at a high level of who Benchmark is. Then we'll go into optical alignment challenges that you might have in manufacturing, discuss design for automated assembly, and then talk about optical tolerance analysis and how it can be beneficial and how it can help with the development of your system. Then we'll go into some of the assembly equipment strategies and things to think about as you're building your piece of equipment. And then we'll talk about an automation cell example that we have here at Benchmark. So Benchmark at a glance, we're about a $3 billion company that has 400 or over 450 product design engineers. We are publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange, and we've been in business for over 40 years now. We are a leading global partner for outsourced design, engineering, and manufacturing of complex products. So we do like to work in more of that high complexity product instead of doing like consumer electronics or devices like that. So more in that medium to lower volume than that high volume area. We are a joint design manufacturer. What that means for you guys is that any development, any work we do with you, you retain all IP. It's all of your IP. We hold none of it. We work in a lot of different sectors, from semi-capital equipment to medical to complex industrials, advanced computing and communications, and aerospace and defense. We do follow a phased development process. Ours is a 7-step process. The main points here really are that our process is compliant with ISO 9001, ISO 1345, and AS 9100. We like to bring in our manufacturing team very early in development, so that we can make sure that we have a seamless and easy transition when we go from development to manufacturing. All right, so now we'll jump more into some of the technical information. First, we'll start out with just discussing some of the optical alignment challenges in a manufacturing setting. So optical alignment is very sensitive, right? Any small misalignments can significantly affect performance. Optical alignments are crucial for many high precision applications like such as laser systems or telescopes, microscopes, vision systems, fiber optics. Really anything that has to do with optics gets usually pretty sensitive. Alignment procedures when we're doing development on this need to be quick and easy. We want to be able to have anyone be able to perform the integration of the system. And then alignment systems need to have the resolution to meet the required performance. So making sure that you're using the correct equipment so that you get the highest resolution feedback that you need to do your alignment, as well as making sure you're using the correct actuators or motors for the alignment manipulations. If you can't move at a small enough increment, you might not be able to meet the performance you need. The design must incorporate features and considerations needed by the assembly equipment. So how you're handling material, how you're doing the alignment and holding on to your components. Um, Optics must be handled properly to reduce contamination. And when I say reduce contamination, there's a wide range of that, right? So we don't want particulates on the optical surfaces that could cause uh, scatter or performance or cause performance degradation, but also we don't want contamination on a bond surface. If we're using an adhesive to bond an optic in, if we have contamination there, you might not get a good bond, and your optic could fall off. Um, so we talked a little bit about mechanical tolerancing and what that means for balancing with alignment. We're going to discuss now a little bit about active versus passive optical alignment. So passive alignment is a method where components are aligned based on tolerances without any feedback. Active alignment is a method that uses feedback to adjust the alignment based on real-time measurements. So in a passive alignment, it usually requires tight tolerancing. That can help reduce cycle time, but it will also likely increase the component cost significantly. And if you're dealing with a high precision system, you still may require active alignment. Active alignment will a lot of the times let you get away with looser tolerancing on your components or your fixturing, which then can help reduce your system level cost. But it might make your active alignment more complex. Um, so if you look at the plot in the bottom left-hand corner, this gives you an idea of relative cost compared to dimensional tolerances. So you can see as your tolerances get tighter and tighter, um, you're going to exponentially increase the cost of your component, or you can. Um, Now, a tolerance analysis can really help you determine that balance you need. And utilizing active alignments may help reduce the cost and still meet performance requirements. Now, as you bring in alignments, your process might get more complex. So that's where automation can help to still reduce cycle time and reduce the complexity. So um, it's more accessible to have integrated by more people. Um, all right, so we're going to jump into optical tolerance analysis. I think optical tolerance analysis, when you're designing a system or even bringing a system to manufacturing, is very important to understand the capability and what is needed. So, tolerance analysis can be performed pretty easily in optical software such as Zemax or Code 5. Um, we use Zemax at Benchmark, so when we talk about it, I'm going to most likely be referring to things in Zemax. One of the most important things that I see when optic or tolerance analysis are done is that they're not realistic. So we want to make sure our analysis and our simulations are as realistic as possible. And some of the key elements that I kind of go through when I'm doing it is I really want to verify the system is set up correct. So making sure you're on the latest rev of drawings. We all know that during development, you'll have a lot of different revisions as you're doing design iterations and things like that. So make sure that you're using the most up-to-date files. Then include the tolerances for all components, right? So not just the optical components, but the optics, the fixturing of how you're going to hold the component, the housings, the tooling, everything. Anything that can impart an error to the alignment should be included in the analysis, as well as accounting for environmental system requirements. So if you have a large temperature range that you need to meet for your system, you may want to say simulate at low temperature and then simulate at high temperature and then also simulate in your kind of working temperature, your average temperature of the system, to make sure that as you go over that temp range, you are still going to meet those performance requirements. Um, and then simulate each subassembly active alignment. So in Zemax, you can set up compensators and perform an optimization after the tolerances have been put in. To help explain this, I have a picture off to the right there that is taken from a Zemax tutorial on how to build a spectrometer. I am just using this as an example, so I can kind of walk through what I mean by simulate each subassembly active alignment. So for this example, you can see a red box around subassembly 1, which would be like a collimation subassembly. And then you see a green box around the focusing unit. So we're going to assume both of those subassemblies have an active alignment that's done in a production setting, and they're done separately. So in a tolerance analysis, we would want to simulate that with those tolerances for everything that is in that subassembly, and then allow the compensators on the lenses or the detector or the fiber, wherever we need for those compensators to match production, and perform those simulations, and then load that full population data basically into the full system. So now when it goes into the full system and you do the tolerance analysis of the rest of the components, you would use these subassemblies as a full compensator. So what I mean by that is your fiber and lens for this collimation would now be locked together, and your alignment in your production process would likely be moving that whole subassembly. So you can't move the fiber relative to the lens, just like you can't move the detector relative to the other lenses in that focusing unit. They would be held constant, and you would perform your final alignment of the system that way. So just trying to make sure that in the tolerance analysis, you simulate it as the process is going to be in production. This can help it be more realistic. Then validate the simulations are working as expected. I know this probably sounds obvious, but there's been quite a few times where I found reviewed analysis and found that the optic was not moving as they expected, or when they impart the tolerance into it, that it's not performing the tolerance adjustment as they expect. So just make sure that everything is working like you want it to. And then finally, I mean, use the results to help determine the tolerances you need. So when you're doing this early on in development, you might not really know what the system needs yet, but this tolerance analysis can help you understand the tolerances you should be setting on your components, on your fixturing for it, as well as you're simulating the active alignment, so now you can understand what range of motion you need in those actuators to be able to perform the alignment and still meet requirements and have low scrap costs and things like that. So make sure you actually look at the data and keep coming back to it as you go through development. All right, so now we've talked about tolerance analysis and how that can be beneficial. Let's jump into more of the considerations for automated assembly. Um, so handling and fixturing of components is going to be important. A lot of the times in applications, you're dealing with very small optics or very small components. So how are you going to handle those? And are there any features that need to be added to the design so that you can actually grab it with a mechanical or vacuum gripper? What is the alignment procedure you're going to be using? So try to determine or at least have an outline of what you think that alignment will look like so that you can understand the degrees of freedom you need, and step sizes that are required to meet the performance requirements. Again, some of this can come out of um, the tolerance analysis that would be done alongside of it. Um, what is the feedback used for the alignments? So are you using laser power, autocollimators, interferometers, vision systems? Um, and are these part of your system that you're building? So are you getting feedback directly from your system, or do you need to probe it with an autocollimator? And do you need to have access holes in your assembly so that you can actually probe the optic surface that you're looking at, or just these different considerations to actually be able to get the data out to perform those alignments? Is there any special processing of components? For example, will polishing a side of an optic to view a bond line with a vision system help you? So you can see an example of that in the bottom picture there. Um, that has the top surface polished so that we can actually image through that optic. That is not required for performance of the system, but what it does allow us is we can see that bond line. We can ensure that we have a big enough bond line there to meet mission requirements as it goes through shock, vibe, whatever that system might see, to ensure that we don't have the optic fall off. And then mounting strategy for components and assemblies. So are you using adhesive, screws, set screws, retaining rings? How are you going to actually hold your optics in place or your sub-assemblies in place? Um, I'll use adhesive as an example because a lot of the times we'll use adhesive for our assemblies, and it'll be a UV cure adhesive. So how are you going to dispense your adhesive? Are you going to have access to do that after the alignment? Do you need to dispense adhesive before the alignment? And then since it's a UV cure adhesive, do you have access to get that UV dose to your bond line, and I guess importantly a uniform dose to your bond line. So if you see the image in the top left there, the modification for UV, that's an assembly where we actually designed in a feature into it so that we could fix our optic that we were aligning. Um, because if we didn't have that hole, we wouldn't be able to distribute the UV where we needed to because of the tight housing that it's in, as well as it wouldn't be uniform. So sometimes when you don't have a uniform dose, you might actually shift alignment while it's curing, and you're getting some shrinkage on one side of your part versus the other, which can mess with performance. All right. Now we can jump a little bit more into assembly equipment strategy. So we talked about some of the design considerations for your actual components, but now there's also some design considerations and strategies you can look into for just the equipment that you'll be using. Um, you want to build in feedback wherever possible. This is going to help reduce the need for search algorithms, and you're not having to look for first light, right? And those are very time consuming. So this will help reduce your cycle time as long as you can get feedback. Identify equipment needed for the alignment. And what I mean by that is make sure that you have the correct actuators with the right resolution, right? So some of the factors you would need to consider are step size, the speed, um, the range of motion you have. So is it going to cover enough range to do your actual alignment, or are you going to be cut short? Load capacity. This will be more dependent on if you have a heavy system you're trying to do alignments on. You need to make sure that it can hold the components. Repeatability and reliability as well. Um, and then vision systems. So vision systems can help to improve quality, reduce cycle time, achieve more consistent performance. A lot of the benefits come from using the vision system as guidance, so that you can get feedback of exactly where your part is, and where you're moving your part to. Adhesive monitoring, defect detection, and measurements, so you can see on the right image there. That's an example of using a vision system to monitor the amount of adhesive that's been transferred onto an optic. So by us being able to monitor that, you can one, ensure that you have enough adhesive for the bond line so that your, again, optic's not going to fall off. But then second, you have not put too much on there that you have a risk of that adhesive flowing onto the clear aperture of your optic or getting into the areas that you don't want it to be. Um, and then we have automated adhesive dispense. So again, how are you going to dispense it? Are you going to use a robot that dispenses it after it's been aligned? Do you have enough room to do that? Or do you need to dispense it on the optic before it goes into place? That's kind of more like what you see in that right image. We dispense it onto the optic, then we move it into place because it's going into a very tight housing. And then a critical one is building in automated UV cure solution to the system. And what I mean by that is um, getting your UVs as close as possible to the bond line. You want to efficiently deliver that dose of UV so you're not having to flood the whole system with UV and take a long time to cure. This will allow you to cure much faster and have better control of it. you'll have a more uniform dose and a higher dose. You can see an example of that. So in some cases, if we can't get it built into the system so it's close to that bond line, we'll build it into a custom gripper. So this is a vacuum chuck that holds an optic, and you can see, if I put my laser pointer on here, you can see there's some LEDs placed here. What that does is it gets our UV LEDs very close to that bond line, so we can pulse it for very short pulses and get it to cure very quickly, but also have a lot of control on its placement. All right. So now I will jump into an automation cell example that we have here at Benchmark. Um, this comes in very useful in a lot of different applications. So we have created an automation platform for prototypes and development of precision assembly processes. So we can very quickly develop and build prototypes for customers. And then while we're doing that prototype build, we'll actually be able to understand and start to develop that process and also determine what equipment is needed. So this automation platform has a lot of equipment on it that might not be used in every application. So it allows us to start paring down what we need for more of a production process of your specific system. The system does, or our automation platform utilizes kinematic mounting, so it aids in quick changes between different builds. This allows us, if we have multiple sub-assemblies that need to be aligned for a system, we can very quickly change between them. We can also change between different customer builds. These fixture changes take place in less than 10 minutes, so it's pretty quick. The coordinate system stays calibrated across the different fixtures just due to that kinematic mount. And then we also have robot grippers and end effectors that are quick change. So depending on your optic, depending on your assembly, it's likely you need a custom gripper to hold it. So those can be designed fairly quickly and can be changed on and off of our robot very, very quickly. And you can see in the images there, that right image is kind of a far out view of what this automation cell looks like. We have multiple vision systems, adhesive dispense robots, hexapods, with a lot of different things going on there to use as feedback as well as to do these precision alignments. And it really enables fast turn, high precision prototypes. Um, yeah. So we can go on to conclusions now. I'll touch on some of the high points that we discussed. So early consideration of alignment procedures in the design process can really help reduce the number of iterations needed to have a cost-effective and high-performing system. A tolerance analysis of the optical system enables balancing active alignment and component tolerances to reduce overall cost. I think this is one of the most important aspects here, is really being able to develop that tolerance analysis, have it be realistic and help guide your design, and then also be able to go back and update as you develop further and get more data to feed back into that model. And then which automation strategy is best for your application will be dependent on the product and performance requirements needed. But this is something that Benchmark can also help determine and determine that best path forward for you. Determining the correct equipment for your alignment solution is critical to meeting system performance objectives. So if you don't have high enough resolution feedback coming, or if you aren't able to take small enough step sizes, you might not be able to align to the resolution you need. So making sure you select that equipment correctly from the beginning will be important. And then Benchmark has an automation cell that can be used to build precise prototypes very quickly. This we've used over quite a range of different product lines, and it helps us to develop for you guys at a much faster pace. All right. So before we go to questions, I just want to point out that at the top of your screen, there is a materials tab. We do have additional case studies in there if you guys want to download and look at. Otherwise, you can also visit bench.com/optics to see some of that information. But are there any questions anybody has at this point?
Thank you so much, Zach, for presenting. Just to echo your statement here, we now have time for a few questions before we close. If you haven't already, go ahead and type your questions and comments into the webinar chat. Zach, how do you detect whether the adhesive is properly spread when you attach the optics onto the housing surface?
Yeah, so we in that specific application I was showing there, we use a vision system, and I believe that one's actually using Cognex to determine what the ring of the bond line is that you can see through there, so that it's at most focus. And then we'll measure that to ensure that we have the area we want for the bond line. Not every application is that simple. But we try to design things in like that, and in that example, polishing that optic allows us to have that visual.
This one builds on it a little bit, and my apologies if
Mhm.
you pretty much already answered it, but how do you calibrate the adhesive dispenser so it will dispense precisely on the right location on such a
Ah,
tiny optic?
yeah. So that one is also done on that one system is done with the vision system. And then we have a few different vision systems in place. One actually points directly at that adhesive dispense, so we can image that optic and we can determine where it needs to be on that optic, and it basically will measure it
Hmm.
and ensures that we're placing it in the correct location. And that also is using an additional vision system to measure the amount of adhesive that's there. So that's one thing that vision systems can help us quite a bit with because it is a critical application.
Gotcha, gotcha. Can you explain a little bit about kinematic mounting?
Yeah, so the kinematic mounting that we are using on our system um, is using three V grooves and precision um, balls basically to align.
Hmm.
Um, and then part of that too is making sure that that kinematic mount is calibrated to the whole automation cell. So that has we have a few different ways that we do that. One, we have a vision system. We also have a auto collimator, and we use alignment fixturing to help us
Hmm.
determine that. So there's a few different ways we can do that. But,
Awesome, thank you for that. What are the material considerations when designing for wide operating temperatures?
Uh, yes. Okay, that's a good question. That is very important when building or designing a system. I mean, coefficient of thermal expansion is one of the first things that comes to my mind is making sure that the CTEs of your different materials that you're using are going to still yield you a good performance. So
Hmm.
there's different simulations you can do. Um, There's also, I mean, I talk a lot about using adhesives because that's what we use a lot for our mounting of optics, but you you want to make sure you pick the right adhesive. So if the glass transition is too low for that adhesive and say you go to your higher temperature range and your adhesive softens, your optic may fall off, and that's a critical failure of the system. Um, so there's a lot of different considerations. I get another one might be the modulus of your
Hmm.
adhesive. If I think through that, if you have too rigid of an adhesive after it cures, it might be too brittle for you to make up some of those CTE changes. Whereas if it's too soft, it might not be right for application either. So it's really understanding your application and walking through some of those adhesive items and CTEs of materials for fixturing.
Understood. If my model shows tighter tolerance than I want, what steps should I take to evaluate what I can change on the design?
Um, yeah, this comes up a lot, right? Um, I always go back to the tolerance analysis. So if
Hmm.
you're having one component that's extremely tight and it's causing you a lot of high cost for that part, I'd revisit the tolerance analysis. Maybe there's an area where if you loosen that, it's gonna cause your alignment to degrade, but you may be able to open up an alignment, like your active alignment window by changing what your actuator is, so you have a bigger range to perform that alignment. So it's really seeing, my first step would be seeing if there's an alignment you can push that tolerance window into to help account for it.
That makes sense. Sorry, we're going to jump around a little bit here. Do you
Yep.
use any sensor to detect if your optics make contact with the housing during alignment to prevent damage?
Um, so in that automation cell, there is not anything that's checking for hitting, other than um, one way we'll do it is you'll bring that hexapod up very, very slowly, and you'll look for when your optic is no longer causing a signal change.
Hmm.
So we know how much room we have, so we can bring it up close to the that range, and then basically back off once you don't see the optic move. Another example of a different system that's not shown here, um, we can look for slight alignment shifts. So basically, you're going to see a pointing change in that system, we're aligning a laser. So you see a drastic pointing change in the laser
Hmm.
when you just barely touch the housing. So we'll look for some of those signals on our measurement equipment for jumps in feedback, basically.
That makes sense. Do you have any experience finding the right adhesive for glass to metal, whether it be copper, stainless steel, aluminum bindings?
Yes. I a lot of the times will work with our material people to make sure that I select the right adhesive. So that it is very critical to one to make sure that your adhesive is going to adhere to those substrates, right?
Hmm.
Um, so it's working with I would work with our materials people as well as outside adhesive suppliers to verify for those applications.
That makes sense. I have one final question for you, Zach. How
Hmm.
does Benchmark's automation platform reduce the risk for contamination?
Reduce the risk of contamination. Yeah, so the automation cell that we use to build a lot of these prototypes, it's in a class 10,000 clean room. Um, it's not the cleanest clean room in the world, but we are able to also build enclosures around this. So in the past, if we still aren't able to reach the cleanliness requirements we need, we can build custom enclosures that have a HEPA filter and monitor the particle count internally to bring it down to whatever level we need. We also, I mean, we're using on that system a hexapod and a UR robot, so they're low particle generating pieces of equipment. Um, so that's the system level. Now, one of the things with cleanliness or contamination is due to operator, right? So we use that robot for material handling. So you're also reducing the risk of, say, I mean, in a clean room, you're using gloved hands, but an operator can also always touch their face or something, and you can leave oils behind. So by using that robot, we're also trying to reduce the risk of contaminating parts.
Gotcha. Zach, I did lie to you. Do you mind if I throw one more at you?
Yeah, yeah, that's fine. Yeah,
Is adhesive shrinkage during UV curing a problem for your alignment?
yeah, yeah, for sure. It can be. So, like on a lot of our systems, we will monitor that adhesive shrinkage and account for that in the alignment,
Hmm.
and that's where a lot of the trying to make sure it's a uniform dose of UV is important, because accounting for shrinkage over the whole part is much easier than accounting for shrinkage at one side that causes an alignment shift, right? So
Hmm.
it is very important, and we do try to monitor and build that into the alignment system itself, and it will kind of monitor that over different builds and update its adjustment.
Understood. Thank you so much. If we have not answered your questions already, please look out for a reply from us later on via email. And just one final note, this whole session was recorded and it will be available on the Photonics Media website shortly, and you will receive links to that recording via email. And I'd like to thank Zach Clausen from Benchmark one last time, and thank all of the viewers who have participated in design considerations for automated manufacturing of optical assemblies. This webinar was presented by Benchmark and hosted by us at Photonics Media. Thank you all so much for joining us.